Today, I want to talk about a topic that I don't think gets discussed enough, which is how powerful community is for your business's growth. And stick with me because I know you're probably thinking, Alice, everyone talks about community. I know that community matters, but I think not for the reasons that we often discuss. I should say, by the way, welcome to episode number 339 of Starting the Conversation. I'm your host, Alice Benham. I've been running a business now for over 10 years. And in the last couple of years, the biggest thing that I think has helped my business to grow is being in community, but not in your typical way or for your typical reasons. Here is what I mean by that. I feel like we hear community being talked about through the lens of having a network that you can ask questions to, you can ask people for recommendations, you can ask people for introductions. And it's very much this feeling of kind of being in community. So there's people that you can learn from and people that can kind of give you access maybe to other people or to opportunities. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that community is incredibly valuable and very needed. I can see in my business journey over the last 10 years how that style of community and that benefit of community has worked for me. You know, having people around me that can recommend things, connect me to others, create bridges where they weren't already. That has been really valuable. But I would say for me and for the people that I've supported, you know, clients, students, etc., over the last couple of years, the benefit of community has been so much less about what you can learn or who can introduce you to who, and more about the impact of being around ambitious people and what that does under the surface to your vision, your growth, and you as a business owner. I have a really tangible example of this for me in my business. It was this time last year, and I remember I was on a workation, which, if you haven't heard that phrase before, don't worry. It was very new to me when I heard it a year or so ago. It's basically just like a working holiday. Instead of a retreat where there's, you know, lots of workshops and things in the schedule, it's more about just being in one place with a group of business owners, co-working, kind of co-living and running your businesses together, but away. I was invited on this workation by the amazing Rachel from Accountant She. I'm sure many of you are familiar with her, but she is a formidable business owner, someone I'm very privileged to have as a friend and to run my business alongside. And she invited me to this workation with a guest list that I can only describe as incredibly successful female entrepreneurs. The women that were on this workation, the women I was about to spend a week with, were people that I massively looked up to, you know, vision board kind of people that I would have had as how I want to show up and the success I want to create. But also in saying that as well, people that to me felt quite intimidating, people that I was a little bit scared to kind of be around, to maybe compare my business to, people that felt particularly kind of in another league to me in terms of growth. Now, the first thing I want to say is that is not me putting myself down. That is, if anything, me just owning that I was in a space that felt particularly stretchy, around people that definitely were, kind of stretching me. And that word, that phrase of kind of feeling stretched, I think is the biggest thing that surprised me about that week. I remember going into that workation thinking, I'm going to learn so much. I want to learn how to make these kind of funnels. I want to learn how to get these kind of partnerships. I want to pick that person's brain about that topic. I went in thinking this week is going to be valuable because I'm going to learn a lot. People are going to be able to teach me things, tell me things, recommend me things, introduce me to people. And whilst that definitely happened and I learned a huge amount, the most impactful thing from that week is something I'd never expected. It's something I'd not really thought about going into it, but arguably has benefited my business way, way more than any kind of learning could. And that impact was the difference it made for me as a business owner to be around people who are ambitious, who are going for big things, and who are showing up in alignment with that. I want to call it almost like an invisible impact. It's very visible as it kind of, you know, comes to fruition, but it doesn't feel as tangible. It's not here's what I learned, or here's what I was connected to, or here's the person that I was now in network with. It was more about what was happening beneath the surface. And that impact is something that I didn't just experience in that workation, but it's something that I see whenever I host a retreat and people come together. It's something that I've seen massively happen in my program On It this year. On It is all about facilitating people to work on their businesses, not in them. And I kind of thought the most impactful thing about the program was going to be the method that we follow. We follow the AB method. So we set vision with strategic goals, we create action plans, we track our progress. And yes, that is the core of what makes Onnit really impactful. But what's been so interesting is hearing so much positive feedback and reading stories of how Onnit has helped people grow their businesses this year, and noticing that people are also talking about this sense of community, talking about how it isn't just about doing the work, but doing the work alongside people who are ambitious, who are dreaming big, who believe that big things can happen. Again, that invisible impact of being in community where it's not necessarily what am I learning, but it's more about how am I shifting and how am I feeling differently because of this community that I'm in. I hosted a workation last week in Spain, which was very, very dreamy, and saw this happen again. And what I want to break down is what I think this invisible impact is. Because whilst, yes, learning recommendations, whatever else, that's valuable, this I think is really the most valuable thing about community. The first thing I think that really happens when you surround yourself in this kind of ambitious community is that your vision is stretched because you are around people who have their own vision, who are believing in big things, and who are acting as if that is completely possible. The phrasing I use for myself is being around people who have this no-brainer attitude to vision. This, well, of course it can happen. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. You must have people that come to mind when I say people that maybe just don't think quite as big as you. People where maybe you tell them your vision and they think of immediately what could go wrong or why it's not going to happen. Those people often mean well, right? They're just being a little bit careful. Maybe they're a bit risk averse. But there's something so magic, isn't there, of being around people who are just thinking so big, whose vision is big. And there's something that then happens, I think, to us when we're around people like that, in that then our vision is naturally expanded too. I see it firsthand, when we're in the Onnit calls and people are sharing in the chat their vision and what they're excited about and their goals. It creates this energy. Onnit is a Zoom call based program, but there is genuine energy in those calls because you can sense this feeling of everyone here has vision, has ambition, is thinking big. And naturally, I think that nudges you to do the same. It creates this kind of, almost feeling of like a tide in the water. And it feels easier for you to go in that direction because the people that you're with are doing it too. When you're surrounded by people that are thinking big, but thinking big in a way that to them just feels like, well, no brainer, obviously it's going to happen, it almost gives us a permission slip to do the same. Part of what I found really uncomfortable in a good way about being on that workation this time last year is that it held a mirror up for me of realizing my vision wasn't perhaps as big as I thought it was. Hearing people's vision and their goals kind of made me realize maybe I'm playing a bit smaller than I want to. I wasn't then thinking bigger just for the sake of it, but wondering actually how much have I just not given myself a permission slip to believe that more is possible. There is something so expansive about being around people who just believe in big vision, who have big ideas, who are excited about trying to test the limits of what's possible. Let's be honest, you can learn from many other sources. You can ask AI, you can go on Google, you can, find learning online. But that sense of bigger vision and bigger belief in your vision, that invitation to think bigger, you can't get that anywhere else. And that I think is such a powerful part about being in that environment and in that community. The second benefit, I think, then of being in a community, being in an environment where people are ambitious or working on their businesses, is that you can observe and therefore start to emulate their habits, their approach, their routines, their principles. Particularly on something like a workation or a retreat, you are physically seeing these people's day to day. You are noticing how they show up, how they behave. And I would say I've learned far more about what it takes to run a successful business from observing other successful business owners than I have from, watching a video of how to be a successful business owner or reading a book on habits of successful business owners. I believe a lot of the time we learn best by observing and emulating than we do by just hearing or being told. And that's a huge benefit, I think, of being around other ambitious business owners, is that you get to kind of see and learn from how they're doing things. Whether it's in retreats or in monthly Onnit sessions, people sharing, hey, this is the habit that's helped me. This is the mindset that's really been important in my growth. or even just noticing the way that people are reflecting or the way they're talking. There's so much value in that. I've learned over the last year how to show up for my business in the best way, not by reading a book, but just by being around people that are showing up for their businesses. And again, feeling that kind of energy and noticing what I can learn from those other people. And the third and final thing I want to say about, I think, the power of this kind of invisible impact of community is that it also helps to really validate what you're doing and show you that you are doing better than you think you are. I firmly believe that most business owners are doing far better than they think they are. They're further ahead than they think they are. Their impact is wider and deeper than they think it is. And there's something about getting out of isolation and in community with people who are in a similar position that can help you to feel that way. Being around people who are doing impressive things, who are telling you maybe their wins, their stories, what's going well for them. Again, that feeling of holding a mirror up can happen where then we're able to see what we're doing well in a better way. One of the incredible business owners that came on my workation to Spain a week ago said this themselves. They said, actually, the biggest thing I'm taking from this week is I feel really good about what I'm doing. I've been really affirmed that my business is doing better than I thought it was. It's almost like comparison, but in a helpful way, where again, we're not asking people questions or learning from them, but actually we're just being around other business owners, and in doing so, being able to maybe see ourselves more clearly as well. What I'm talking about in this episode, I feel like I'm kind of working the language out as I go, but it's this idea of like what you get from community that isn't advice, that isn't connections, that isn't, hey, any tips for this? It's all of the stuff that happens beneath the surface, which I believe, and I've seen firsthand in my business, is arguably way more impactful. Being around people that are ambitious, that are like-minded, and the impact that has on your vision being stretched, your goals being expanded, your self-trust and belief being higher, learning those habits and those principles to growth, feeling more validated in what it is that you're doing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I hear that list said out loud and I think, yeah, that's way more powerful than, hey, can anyone recommend a platform for hosting my course? Or, hey, can anyone give me an email address for this person? Again, not taking away from the fact that those things are valuable, but I just believe that we can often find those kind of insights in other ways. And this kind of impact of community can really only come from that community. My invitation to you as you listen to this episode is, where can this community sit for you? To have a village, you've got to be a villager. So where are there opportunities for you to show up like this for others? Or to create environments where this kind of stuff is happening? Maybe it isn't on a formalized workation or retreat. Maybe it's just about reaching out to some people and building this community for yourself. Or maybe it's looking for those opportunities where this community is ready and waiting for you. I would be wrong not to talk about Onnit here, because Onnit is such a hub for these kind of business owners. Everyone in Onnit is ambitious. They're doers, they're action takers. They're also honest. It's not a place where it's toxic positivity. It's people that are imperfect. It's people that lose consistency, but it's people that are doing that with a dedication to their vision. And as I said, it's really surprised me this year that actually that's been so valuable to people in Onnit. Just that feeling of doing this work alongside other people has had this impact on Onnit members, where their vision gets expanded. They're learning more about how to show up as a business owner. They're feeling validated. They're believing and trusting themselves more. If this is resonating, then maybe that's your invitation to think about joining us for Onnit 2026. I'll leave the link in the show notes to join the waitlist. And I'm also very excited to share that there is going to be a free workshop happening on launch day. So on the 4th of November, replay available if you can't come live, to give you a taster of Onnit. If you're hearing me say that there's an energy on these Zoom calls, that you feel differently because you're on a Zoom call and you're thinking, nah, no way, I'm skeptical. How does community show up in a place like that? Then let me prove it to you. Come to that workshop, get a taster of Onnit, see what we're about, clarify your vision, think bigger. Whether you join Onnit or not, that workshop will be so valuable for you. So I'll leave that link in the show notes wherever you're listening. And my invitation to you is just to think about how this lands for you. Community. Yes, an amazing way to learn, expand your network, get advice, get connections. But how could community actually do more for you? How could you get into spaces that help you to stretch your vision, to think bigger, to trust yourself more? That workation this time last year was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever done. But it's the discomfort that often leads to the best, most impactful growth. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back in your ears next week. So until then, know that I'm cheering you on, and make sure to go and sign up to that free masterclass to get a taster of Onnit and get yourself in an environment just like the one that I've discussed today.